Do you ever have that moment where a show doesn't just entertain you, it rearranges your entire brain? That's Pluribus episodes. Just two. And yet it already feels like we've seen something we were never supposed to see. Like we walked into a forbidden room and now must live with the consequences. And episode 3. Oh, episode 3 is the moment everything changes. But before we go there, let me ask you something. Have you ever cared about someone you swear you didn't care about? Someone you pushed away, rolled your eyes at, pretended meant nothing, but the moment they're about to disappear, you run. No thinking, no logic, just Carol, the woman the world calls miserable, emotionless, disconnected, broken, and yet she ran off a presidential jet, threw herself in front of another plane, and said, no. She's not going with you. And if that isn't the most violently human thing, I don't know what is. So today we're going deep, not surface level review, not just summary. We're asking the questions this show wants us to ask. Why did Carol rally? What does the hive mind want? And the biggest one, is humanity worth saving, or are we the true virus? If your brain is already buzzing, good, you're in the right place. Because episode 3 is not just the next chapter, it's the point where the roles reverse. Carol isn't the one being observed anymore. She becomes the observer. Carol will get Zosia. But why that matters, let's start with what everyone is asking. Yes, Carol's going to get Zosia off that plane. But it's not because she sees Zosia as hone of the minds. She sees her the individual, the terrified young woman behind billions of voices. The girl who didn't choose this. The girl who has been alone in the loudest crowd the universe has ever produced. And this right here is where Pluribus becomes terrifyingly philosophical. Because think about it, Zosia is everyone. But she's also herself. What happens when the last human who remembers individuality tries to save the concept of individuality? What happens when the only miserable person is the only one fighting to keep the world from losing sadness, anger, pain, all the things we usually say we want to get rid of? Let me ask you something. And answer in the comments. If you could erase every painful thought forever, but lose your true self, would you do it? I really want to know. Because that's the heart of this story. And honestly, there is no right answer. Carol's backstory. The pain that made her dangerous. Let's talk about Carol. Because episode 3 is almost definitely giving us her backstory. The breathalyzer in her car. The one small detail that tells a huge story. That means she drank to numb something. She did enough times to get caught. And she still keeps alcohol close even now. This is not just sad woman depressed. This is a person who tried to escape her mind long before the world did. And then we have the real dagger. Helen, Carol's partner, the love of her life, the person she hid. Not because she was ashamed of Helen, but because she was afraid of herself. She was afraid of being seen, being known, being vulnerable, being hurt again, so the world called her cold. When really, she was just protecting the only warmth she ever had. But now Helen is gone. Real grief? It makes you dangerous. Because now Carol has nothing to lose. And people with nothing to lose and make history. The collective's morality. A beautiful horror here is the thing that makes Pluribus so disturbing. The hive mind is not evil. It doesn't want power, it doesn't want control. It doesn't even want to harm. It wants harmony, connection, peace. The thing humanity has been chasing since the very beginning. And yet, if it spreads to Carol, the last independent mind disappears, meaning no more conflict, no more grief, no more war, no more loneliness, but also no more art, no more individuality, no more identity, no more me. Let me ask you this, if everyone shared one mind, would love still mean anything if there was no there to love? Think about that. The hive mind can't hurt anyone. But saving humanity hurts humanity. This is the paradox, the trap. And Carol is the glitch in their paradise, the virus inside the virus. Subhumanity is natural once only before we go deeper. If you love high detail breakdowns, human psychology and storytelling, and exploring shows that challenge reality, then subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. Because we are going all the way with this series. Alright, back to the mind-bending part. The question episode 3 will episode 1 ask, what is happening? Episode 2 asks, what does it mean to connected? Episode 3 will ask, should we be saved? Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud, maybe humanity does deserve to end. We destroy each other, our planet, our empathy, our potential, and we call it progress. Maybe the hive mind is better? But if it is, why does Carol feel so violently wrong about it? Why does she run? Why does she fight? Why does she scream like someone who still has something left to lose, even though she already lost everything? That answer is episode 3. And we're just getting started. So now we get to the part that has everyone whispering the same question, why her? Why Carol? Why is she the only one who can stand in front of the hive mind and not collapse? See? People assume Carol is miserable because she's cynical. Because she has a dark sense of humor. Because she doesn't care about anything. That's wrong. Carol isn't miserable because she feels nothing. Carol is miserable because she feels too much. And when you feel too much for too long, for too many years, you don't scream. You don't cry. You learn to silence yourself. and that silence becomes mistaken for emptiness. But emptiness, not the same thing as numbness. It's depth that has nowhere left to go. This is why the collective can't absorb her, because the hive mind requires openness. Surrender. A willingness to dissolve yourself into something greater. But Carol, she has spent her entire life refusing to dissolve. She refuses to be swallowed. Not by love, not by fame, not by expectation, and especially not by peace, because peace requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means pain. And pain is the thing Carol has sworn will never control her again. This is why episode 3 is the pivot point. The hive mind sees Carol as the last missing piece, but Carol sees the hive mind as the final threat, two unstoppable forces. One built from infinite connection and one built from infinite walls, and now they stand in front of each other. On a runway, beside a plane, while the world watches silently. Tell me this isn't cinema. The emotional overload mechanism? The key to the cure, we have to talk about the seizures. The collective overloads when emotional intensity reaches a breaking point. This is important. This is not just glitching. This is data overwhelm. Think of it like this: when a hive mind experiences pure unfiltered human kit fractures, not physical painlets, not danger, but emotion. Specifically, rage, fear, grief, shame, the emotions humans spend their entire lives trying to avoid. This means something powerful. Humanity's flaws are the cure. Our hurt, our scars, our contradictions, our inner storms. The things we hate about ourselves are the things that make us irreplaceable. So now the question becomes, what happens when Carol stops holding back? Because up until now, she hasn't let herself break. She numbed. She suppressed. But Zosia is the first person Carol may allow herself to feel for again. Which sets up the most dangerous thing possible. If Carol feels again, the hive mind collapses. Not just glitches, not just collapses. This is where the tension becomes unbearable. Because Carol saving Zosia might also mean Carol destroys Zosia. If Zosia feels too strongly with, the entire hive suffers. Billions. So the show places us in a moral trap. If Carol stays cold, as Zosia survives, but humanity is absorbed. If Carol opens her heart, as Zosia could die, but humanity might return. Let me ask you directly. Is saving someone still love if it destroys them? Think about that before answering. Because that is the core of episode 3, Carol and Zosia. Not lovers. Not enemies. Something else. Their relationship is strange. Not romantic, not parental, not sisterly, not symbolic. It is recognition. Carol sees herself in Zosia, a woman who did not choose the life she carries. A person drowning in expectations she never asked for. Someone who is surrounded by everyone and yet completely alone. And Zosia sees Carol as the first person not trying to use her. Kumba wants her power. The government wants her knowledge. The world wants her salvation. Carol wants nothing, no agenda, claim. Just understanding. And that's why Zosia follows her. Not because she is told to. Not because the hive mind compels her, but because she chooses, and choice is the one thing the collective does not truly understand. Mid-video audience engagement moment. Now I want your brain in this. If you could answer one of these questions, which one would you choose? A, should humanity be saved? B, is Carol selfish or noble? C, is individuality worth suffering for? D, would you join the collective if it meant eternal peace? Drop A, B, C, or D in the comments. I want to see where our minds are. And don't cheat by saying it depends. Pick one. Trust your gut. Your answer might reveal more about you than you think. The planet without us. A thought the show wants you to consider. Let's be honest for a moment. If humans disappeared tomorrow, no war, no pollution, no cruelty, no ego, hatred, the planet would heal. Nature would grow back. Animals would roam freely. The world would breathe again. So tell me, are we the main character of Earth? Or the villain? This show is not asking whether humanity can be saved. It's asking whether we should be. And episode 3 is where Carol is forced to answer that. Not with words, but with a choice. Where episode 3 takes us, this episode will likely be smaller in location, larger in emotional stakes, focused on Carol plies Zosia alone, with flashbacks weaving into present conflict. Carol will not cry. Carol will not confess. Carol will not break, but she will crack, and when she cracks, the hive mind will shake. The world will shake. Reality itself might shake, because when the last free mind trembles, every tether feels it. Carol is not the savior. She is the fault line.